Occasionally in my What Happened To series, there are games that are so good that it confuses me why we never got a sequel. Sleeping Dogs is in that category, often compared to a hybrid between the Yakuza series and the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Sleeping Dogs shares a lot in common with those two series, yet still does enough to stand out really firmly on its own. Sleeping Dogs is a game that sits very fondly in mine and many other gamers' memories. Hello, I'm Roy McCoy and welcome to the latest episode of What Happened To, where we take a game and/or series from history that seemingly disappeared and ask those all-important questions. What was it? What happened to it? And will we ever see another one? The focus of this episode is, of course, Sleeping Dogs. But if you like these kind of videos, don't forget to subscribe to my channel because I focus on story-driven experiences. And please also throw me a like on this video because it really helps my channel grow. And after that shameless plug, buckle up because I'm about to take you on a journey to learn all about a game that I would argue is a gem that deserved to have its own series. Yet sadly, as of yet, has not progressed beyond the first entry. For those of you not aware of what this game is, it is an action-adventure game set in Hong Kong and delivered much like the most recent Grand Theft Auto games in the third person. And the story follows a gentleman called Wei Shen, who is an undercover Chinese-American police officer who is trying and succeeds in infiltrating the Triad. Now, if that story, that little summary of the plot doesn't entice you, or doesn't remind you of how great this game is, let me just continue by saying the plot of this game is loaded with dramatic, brutal, and shocking and surprising moments, with enough plot twists as our main character infiltrates the Sun On Yi Triad to keep you highly entertained for hours. So, what made this game so special? Now, I've already compared it to Grand Theft Auto, and yes, it does share a lot in common with it. For example, as I've said, it's a third-person game, the topic is crime, and it's set in an open world in which some of the areas are blocked or locked until you open them in the story. However, this game also does enough of its own things to make it really stand out. First of all, there's the combat system. Now, I can promise you that I am not the first person in the world to compare the combat system to that of the Batman Arkham games. And I'll also go as far as to say it's also been compared countless times to Grand Theft Auto and Yakuza. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel with this video, I'm just trying to explain that this game is brilliant. Anything that combines the combat of the Batman series with the subject matter and the feel of Grand Theft Auto is a winner in my opinion. Now, I've already said this game sits very fondly in my memory, and to be honest, the moment I decided to make this video, I started downloading it and I started replaying it. And instantly, as soon as I started playing it again, all those fond memories, those warm and fuzzy feelings that I had for this game came flooding back. One of the other major points of this game that is brilliant is the XP system. Now, there are three types of experience points. There's the Triad points, the Face points, and the Police experience points. You get Triad points from criminal activities and also exceptionally fun and gory environmental kills. You get Face points, or Face XP, from completing civilian side quests. And quite obviously, the Police XP comes from helping the police or not committing crimes. And you can use all these XPs, these different XPs, to unlock abilities or unlock cosmetic items like new clothes or vehicles. And the brilliant thing about this game is that NPCs react differently to you depending on what you're driving or what you own or what you look like. So there you go, you've got an interesting and inviting story, a great XP system, and a phenomenal combat system. Also, Wei Shen moves around the world by running, jumping, effectively engaging in parkour, and also driving boats and cars and motorcycles. It is effectively Grand Theft Auto with more of a leaning on parkour and a great combat system. These were the elements of the game that critics praised highly when the game was released. Sadly, the animations and camera angles were the strongest complaints and areas of criticism that were levied against this game. And also, some people found it disappointing that there was no multiplayer feature. Now, for me, that's not a huge problem, but I can understand for many gamers out there, they would have liked to take this game online. More about that topic coming up later. Just before we move on to the history of this game, I have to say that some of the side quests, such as going to karaoke bars and street racing and fight clubs, reminds me a hell of a lot of Yakuza and made the gaming world seem bigger and better. Now, upon release, way back in 2012, most of the scores were 8s, 8.5s and 9s. Critics, as I said, praised the combat, they praised the XP system and criticised the camera angles and animation. So there we have it. In my opinion, this game had a great story, great combat, great XP system, and was effectively a Grand Theft Auto style game, but did enough of its own thing to make it unique and stand out. So now let's talk about what went wrong. And to talk about that, we need to look at the development history. And while its troubled development started way back in 2008, 4 years before the game's eventual release, our story starts now at the end of 2007, when a newly founded games company called United Front Games were approached by Activision with the prospect and idea of developing an open world game. The support of Activision allowed United Front Games to grow rapidly, and soon a game known as Black Lotus began development. Black Lotus is the first of at least 3 names that have been attributed to this game, and initial reports implied that this game was a dark and gritty crime drama. Development of the game was first revealed to the public in 2009, but no longer had the name of Black Lotus. No, when it was first revealed, it was known as True Crime Hong Kong, because at some point in that first year of development, Activision decided to make it part of the True Crime series. Now, due to reports, this is down to the fact that sales had been disappointing in the True Crime series, and Activision felt that the Black Lotus idea could help to make the franchise more successful. So there we have it, the second name, True Crime Hong Kong. After an initial delay till 2010, the game was finally cancelled, with Activision citing quality issues as the reason that they would no longer be investing in the product, feeling that it could not be competitive with other games at the time. And that's talking about Grand Theft Auto and games like Red Dead Redemption. At this point, it sounds like United Front Games agreed totally with Activision. However, it was revealed soon after that True Crime Hong Kong was playable from start to finish and was virtually complete in terms of content, just before Activision pulled the plug. This sudden drop in funding and investment forced United Front Games to cut a huge amount of the staff that they'd taken on after that initial investment. So at this point, the story for United Front Games and Sleeping Dogs looks pretty bleak, with job cuts and basically the whole company, the future of the company, looking in doubt. And that was until Square Enix bought the publishing rights to the game. Now, what's really interesting about this deal is that Square Enix did not buy the rights to True Crime, and instead only bought the rights to True Crime Hong Kong, which they renamed as Sleeping Dogs. And the reason for this, it looks like that Square Enix saw the quality and potential that United Front Games had created in the form of Sleeping Dogs. And it's at this point we have to say that this seems like a really savvy investment on the part of Square Enix, because in a relatively short space of time, they turned the game round to completion. And in 2012, it was released to those reviews, those 8s, those 8.5s, and those 9s. And as I've said, by the critics, this game was received really well. So at this point, you've got a great game released and backed by Square Enix that received good reviews. So what went wrong? Well, for all intents and purposes, it comes down to sales. Now, even though pretty early on the game sold about 1.5 million copies and was the best-selling game in the UK in its week of release, Square felt that the sales figures branded the game as a failure. And in 2013 they announced that Sleeping Dogs, along with Hitman Absolution and Tomb Raider, had been successful in their game development, but that Square Enix considered them failures in terms of sales expectations. Now, one thing I know from Square is that they run a very tight business model. And it wasn't long ago that I made a video about a game called Vagrant Story and what happened to it. And that again is another Square Enix game, which was also considered a relative failure in terms of sales. And what happened to that one seems to have happened to this. We never got a sequel. However, what we did get in 2014 was the Definitive Edition, which was released on the PlayStation 4. So if you do own a PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, you should definitely look at getting this game, because that contains the base game and all previously released 24 pieces of downloadable content. And that's not to mention the fact that they did some work on the graphics and the audio. So that's pretty much where the story of Sleeping Dogs ends 6 years ago. However, it is widely known that in 2013, United Front Games started working on a sequel to Sleeping Dogs, probably known as Sleeping Dogs 2. Or how about Sleeping Dogs Black Lotus? And apparently the game would once again follow the story of Wei Shen. Now it's at this point that I would have to say that all reports that came out about this game in its early phases implies that this was going to be a hugely ambitious title, and sadly never really got beyond the ideas stage. But apparently the game would be set in new areas of Hong Kong and would allow interaction with your mobile phone to control police inside the game. And every single idea that I've heard about this game inspires me and makes me believe that this game would have been far superior to the brilliance of the original. However, it wasn't meant to be, because before the game ever entered into production, it was cancelled. The idea was scrapped. But that isn't the total end to the story of Sleeping Dogs. As rumours continue to rumble on that other people have bought the rights or another game is in development, there are still many fans out there that hope we could soon see a Sleeping Dogs 2. And that's not to mention the fact there was a cancelled spin-off named Triad Wars, which was a PC online game with MMO elements. But before this game was cancelled, it did actually enter beta phase. But United Front Games took the initiative to cancel it and issued the statement saying, "We loved seeing how you played Triad Wars, but we know it wasn't right for many of you." And that's because the fans just didn't love it. And probably many like me wanted that beautiful and amazing single player experience. But Triad Wars wasn't the only thing to come out of Sleeping Dogs. No, apparently there was also, or is going to be, a film adaptation. And this film was announced way back in 2017. With apparently Donnie Yen starring as Wei Shen. Now, if you're not sure who Donnie Yen is, he is a highly skilled martial artist and took on the character of Chirrut Imwe in Rogue One: A Star Wars Story. Now, Donnie Yen confirmed back in February 2018 that the film was still happening. And if you Google it, there is a film called Sleeping Dogs that I believe stars Sam Neill. However, this is not that. And for a couple of years, this game basically went silent. You could say they let Sleeping Dogs lie. I had to get it in there. But in July 2020, yes, this year, Yen announced once more that the film was going ahead and it would be his next challenge. But who knows what stage that film is at, especially considering the coronavirus pandemic that has engulfed the world. Will we ever see that film? Well, I don't know. Will we ever see Triad Wars? Probably not. But the aim of this video is not to talk about films or spin-offs. The aim of this video is to focus on Sleeping Dogs, and will we ever see a Sleeping Dogs 2, or indeed a remake of the original? We've already had the definitive edition that included all of the downloadable content, but the actual answer as to whether we will see that sequel or remake is actually quite confusing. Now, if I had to go on my gut instinct alone, I'd say it's quite possible that we will see a sequel. First of all, it's hugely loved and has that fond place in many fans' memories. And secondly, the announcement by Donnie Yen that the film is still going ahead as of July 2020 makes me think that the franchise is still very much at the forefront of at least a filmmaker's mind, which in turn then wouldn't surprise me if a game developer decided that it was going to make the money on the back of the film. So that's why I think it could be happening. However, if Square still owns the rights, and there is a big if on this one, and I'll explain that in a moment, if Square still owns the rights to any production or any sequel to Sleeping Dogs, then no, I don't think it's overly likely. I think it's still possible, but I think Square tends to edge on the side of caution when making financial commitments to games. But the reason I say there is an if relates to the fact that United Front Games, according to certain sources and to its Wikipedia page, now I know at this point you're probably like, don't trust Wikipedia, but sometimes Wikipedia does strike gold. When anything is a fan-made encyclopedia, you have to take certain elements of it with a pinch of salt. But if Wikipedia and certain other sources are to be trusted, United Front Games were sold on the quiet and then closed down as of 2016. Now with this point, I do concur. And the reason that I believe that in 2016 United Front Games were definitely shut down is because if you look at their Twitter account or many of their social media accounts, that's pretty much the time that all activity ceases. One thing, however, that is of a little bit of a surprise is that their website is still functional, but everything on there seems to cease at around 2014 as well. But why did I mention that Wikipedia thing? Well, a couple of times on Wikipedia it mentions that a company called L9 Interactive purchased the rights and the studio in 2019, which I would absolutely love if it was true. I would love that. I'm really hopeful. But my skepticism, my skeptical side of my brain says to me, if a studio seemingly was closed down in 2016 and their social media presence appears to suggest that, then why would the studio be sold 3 years later? Now, it is possible that the rights to the game were sold, but if the studio was closed down, people move on. People don't go into boxes for 3 years, you know? They don't, like, these developers don't just go, oh, I'll wait until the studio gets revitalized, revamped in 3 years' time. As soon as the studio is closed down, it's closed down. Business is over and the staff move on. The only thing that is possible is that the rights to the game have changed hands, and maybe some of the original team have come on board. And this is a big speculation right now, because it seems that only on Wikipedia can you find references at the moment to that L9 Interactive. I hope it's true, but most people, most sources imply that United Front Games are gone. But even though the studio is seemingly gone, it doesn't necessarily mean the game is totally buried. Once again, I'm going to highlight that film being made. And when a film is being made, there is a potential for a game to make money. So whoever owns the rights to this game, be it L9 Interactive, be it United Front Games, be it Square Enix, or be it Disney, who are mentioned on the Wikipedia page, will be sure to see and look at the success of the film and think, if it makes a lot of money, the game could too. And here's hoping, because the prospect of getting a sequel to a game that I argue is one of the most underrated action-adventure games really whets my appetite and excites me. But for this video, that brings us to the end. Let me know in the comments below what game series that seemingly has been forgotten or gone dormant you would like me to focus on in my next video. But for now, this is Roy McCoy, out!